Hello, America, and welcome to American Geordies. Consider this episode a primer on the Israeli-Palestine conflict. I'll be presenting a timeline of events based on an article I found on world101.cfr.org. I will link it below if you want to do your own reading. This video is only going to go up to about the 2000s because I wanted to keep my script at around the 10-minute mark. There will be a part 2 coming up where I go for everything after the 2000s and my personal opinions. Anyways, starting in 1947, the UN has their partition plan. The UN divides Palestine into two states, one Jewish and one Arab, after giving up the military control they've had in the area since World War I. The Jewish state, Israel, declares independence, sparking the First Arab-Israel War, which saw Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria invade Israel. Later in 1948, UN addresses 700,000 displaced Palestinian refugees. Israel gains territory, but so do Egypt and Jordan, including the Old City and its Jewish district. UN passes Resolution 194, which calls for reparations to the refugees, which later becomes interpreted as a right to return. These refugees were displaced by Zionist militias and the Israeli army. This event was part of Nakba, aka the catastrophe, which sought the destruction of Palestinian culture. In 1967 was the Six-Day War, sparked by a series of events starting with Syrian-backed guerrilla Palestinians attempting to push back the Israeli border, causing a back and forth until April 1967 when Syrian fighter jets were destroyed by Israel. The Soviet Union gave inaccurate information to Egypt about Israel moving troops north, and Syrian forces were preparing for a full-scale invasion. To show support for Syria, Egypt moved into the Sinai Peninsula, displacing a UN peacekeeping force. An important trade route was severed from Israel. The American president at the time warned them not to start a war and wanted to reestablish the trade route. However, there was no progress made, and eventually war did break out. Israel makes the first move in this war. The results: Israel loses 700 troops, and their enemies lose over 20,000. Israel gains control of the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem. Later in 1967, the UN asked Israel to return the territories they gained and wants the states to respect each other's borders and live peacefully. In 1973, Egypt and Syria start a war to reclaim some of their territories. The Soviet Union aids Egypt and Syria. The United States aids Israel. Petroleum exporting countries put an embargo on oil to countries supporting Israel, causing oil prices to skyrocket, and eventually a UN-sponsored ceasefire negotiated by the US and Soviet Union. In 1978, Israel and Egypt signed the Camp David Accords. They also start talks of the future of West Bank and Gaza Strip. In 1979, Egypt and Israel sign a peace treaty, officially ending the conflict between the two countries. Israel returns the Sinai Peninsula. The other territories are still up for discussion. In 1987, the First Intifada. An intifada is basically a rebellion. It was sparked when an Israeli driver caused the death of 4 Palestinians via car accident. Images of civilian Palestinian rebellion against Israeli military prevailed, such as citizens throwing rocks at tanks. This led to the start of the group Hamas, a supporter of jihad, a term in the Quran for when a war is fought against enemies of their religion. I would like to put my personal opinion on the interpretation of this term jihad, as I believe it should be interpreted, and anyone that has other information can defend their argument if they choose. I've been hearing this term to demonize Muslims my whole life, and the certain Muslims in question don't do a good job of making the word seem like a good one. But in my opinion, the word jihad should be permission for self-defense, not terrorism. In 1988, Jordan relinquishes the West Bank to PLO. the Palestine Liberation Organization. PLO chairman Yasser Arafat comes out to say they are against violence and that Israel has the right to exist. He supports the idea that all states should respect their borders and live on the lands in peace. The US starts talk with Yasser, which come to a quick end when a terrorist attack hits Israel. In 1991, Madrid Peace Conference starts. Mostly talks about the Arab world and regional issues, but after 2 years, no major breakthroughs. In 1993, the Oslo Accords. PLO and Israel recognize each other through letters. PLO is granted temporary partial control over Gaza Strip and West Bank as Israel withdraws troops. They envision a peace agreement by 1999. In 1994, the Gaza-Jericho Agreement, which grants the West Bank and the Gaza Strip to the newly formed Palestinian Authority, establishes a Palestinian police force, and sees the start of relationships between the Palestinian Authority and Israel. Later in 1994, Israel and Jordan sign a peace treaty, mostly putting the countries on good terms for tourism and trade, as well as giving control of Muslim holy places in Jerusalem to Jordan. At this point in the script, while I was writing it, I was really wondering what went wrong. In 1995, the Oslo II Accord, Israel and Palestine signed the agreement, granting Palestine more territories on the West Bank and defining how the areas will be governed. In 1997, the United States recognized Hamas as a terrorist organization. In the year 2000, you see the Camp David Summit, hosted by President Bill Clinton. Israeli and Palestinian leaders talked with intention to trade some Israel land to Palestine in exchange for 9% of the West Bank. No agreement reached, and Bill Clinton blames the failure on Palestinian leader Arafat. Talks continue but lead nowhere. Later in 2000, the Second Intifada. Israel politicians gather at a Muslim temple. Palestinians are made uneasy by this, and eventually things turn violent. Publicly, the reason stated for the politicians' visit was to establish the right of all Israelites to visit the temple. However, spokesperson and politician Ophir Akunis states that the reason was to show that under a Likud government, the Israeli Conservative Party, the temple will remain under Israeli sovereignty. At the time of this, Ehud Barak was the prime minister, politically aligned with the Israeli Labor Party. Following the start of this intifada, his government started to fall apart, and he called for a special election to replace him. The Likud party member Ariel Sharon won this election, essentially handing the power over to the same government leaders who sought to control Muslim temples within their borders. This concludes part 1, and part 2 should get you up to date on the timeline. As I said earlier, I will be posting the link to the article below for you to check out. Please give it a read to support the ones who actually did most of the research for this. And thank you so much for watching. And don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to help share our voice. Have a good day, everybody.